And I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen really quick. If I can learn how to do everything this way. Okay, you guys, can everybody see the CSBG Organizational Standards screen, or do you see the presenter screen?
I think we're just seeing just the slide, so I think you're good.
Yep, just the slide.
You're seeing the right thing then? Okay, I'm gonna turn off my camera really quick, just because it gets weird with everything, trying to do all of this. Okay, so as we go forward and talking about organizational standards, one of the things that we talk about a lot is what does that look like and why do we have to do them? And what all does this entail? And so some of the learning objectives that we're going to talk about today is just an introduction to them, understanding the differences in the standards between public and private boards, understanding our three categories, knowing the timelines of meeting these standards, and then what it looks like uploading documentation to CAP 60. So just to remind everybody about the mission of CSBG, the national goals provide the Community Action Network a broad target to aim for. And CSBG is really designed to be a flexible spending source that allows communities to address the causes and conditions of poverty based on the needs of their individual communities. These goals then give our network a basis of measuring whether the work we're doing is in alignment with the mission of CSBG, which is A, the reduction of poverty, the revitalization of low-income communities, and the empowerment of low-income families and individuals to become fully self-sufficient. So when we look at this, our goal number one is to make sure that individuals and families with low incomes are stable and achieve economic security. Communities where people with low incomes live are healthy and are offered economic opportunity. And goal number three is to make sure that people with low incomes are engaged and active in building opportunities in our communities. And these goals used to be 6 goals, but in 2017, we redesigned these with a new emphasis on community level work. And in order to differentiate between community level work and individual and family work, the Community Action Network refers to community level work and agency level work as strategies, and individual and family level work as services. And you're going to hear those differences in Roma when we talk about it that way. So in our state, we have 15 agencies, and they are broken up into both public and private CAPs. And when I say CAP, that's just a community action program that's interchangeable with a community action agency or eligible entity. Wyoming is pretty unique in the sense that we have both private and public agencies, and it's expected that there are going to be no new agencies in our region. There are currently 70 plus community action agencies in any given year, and each community action agency is unique in the service and the strategies that they use, and they're also unique in their structure. So a private community action agency is a 501c3 organization that is governed by a tripartite board. And so an example of a private CAA would be our own WYO Helps. They run several different programs such as self-sufficiency, housing, food security. They serve 6 counties. A public community action agency can either be a local government department that is overseen by a tripartite board, or a local government board that is tripartite in structure. An example of a public CAA would be the Campbell County Cares Board. The board is then set up the board is set up as a board of the Campbell County Community Government. but the board themselves does not provide any direct services and instead subgrants the money to other nonprofits in the community. Now, our subgrantees are not typically considered to be a community action agency and thus do not have to have a tripartite board, but they are still a very important part of the community action network. So we're going to just dip right in here real quick to the organizational standards. And these are just a way of looking at how we show that we're doing what we say we're going to do. So the CSBG Organizational Standards are a comprehensive standard developed with input from the entire network through a 3-year multi-phase process led by the Center of Excellence. The organizational standards were announced in January 2015 with the OCS release of IM 138. And they direct states to establish organizational standards by fiscal year 2016. They're organized into 3 thematic groups comprising 9 categories for a total of 58 standards for private nonprofit entities and 50 standards for public entities. Now, the purpose of organizational standards is to ensure that all agencies have the appropriate organizational capacity in both critical financial and administrative areas, as well as areas of unique importance to the mission of community action. So at this time, Erin, I'm going to ask you if you could please put the link, if you haven't already, put the link in the chat window for the self-assessment private CAA final standards PDF, because what that's going to do is give you guys a chart or a link of what those private and public final standards are. So we're going to talk about 3 categories. There's the maximum feasible participation, vision and direction, and operational accountability. Okay, everybody ready to move forward? Any questions so far before I move forward? Okay, make sure if you have any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, and then Erin can let me know if you have any questions on that. We also have Tim, and there's several agencies in the Zoom today that can maybe give some feedback on their experiences working with organizational standards, or a way that they make this process a little bit easier to do. But let's go ahead and get started on what those organizational standards are going to look like in a little bit more detail. So in the maximum feasibility participation, there are several standards that talk about consumer input and involvement. And community action is rooted in the belief that people with low incomes are in the best position to express what they need to make a difference in their lives. CSBG eligible entities work in partnership with the people and the communities they serve. So community action works in a coordinated and comprehensive manner to develop programs and services that will make a critical difference in the lives of their participants. Individuals and families are well in tune to what they need. And when community action taps into that knowledge, it really helps us inform our ability to implement high impact programs and services. So for example, organizational standard 1.1 or 1.1 asks us to demonstrate that people experiencing poverty in our community are participating in our activities. What are some ways that we can show that we are following standard 1.1? Well, on the slide, we can use advisory group documents. If you have an advisory group minute, you can upload those. Your volunteers are board members in some cases, and those board packets and board minutes can document that people representing the low-income community are participating in moving forward in the community action agency. So in the chat, you're going to see a link to the self-assessment tool that you can use for public and private CAAs. And I urge you to grab those so you can see what those standards look like. And I'm just going to go through this, and they also give you examples of what you can do. Standard 1.2 wants to talk about what are some ways that we can demonstrate or show that we looked for the people who are experiencing poverty in our community needs assessment. So we can include our document, which in most cases is going to say, this is the voice of the people that we had fill out surveys. This is what they had to say. If you had community forums, you can write minutes or notes about that, and you can include that as an organizational standard to show that you've met 1.2. The final standard in consumer input and involvement, again, just continues moving forward with understanding that we're also surveying, that we're looking for input from our customers. So if you're doing surveys, any of your data collection tools, make sure that you upload those with your policy and your procedures or your schedule of when you do this. You can also use board or committee reports that reflect that you informed the board about your survey or your customer service data. So as we continue through maximum feasibility participation, we also want to look at community engagement, because we recognize that no CSBG eligible entity can meet all of a community's needs independently, right? We can't do it alone. So we have to rely on formal and informal partnerships, ongoing community planning, advocacy and engagement of people with low incomes, including partners ranging from our community and faith-based organizations, educational institutions, government, and businesses. We all work together with the community action agencies and other CSBG eligible entities to successfully move people out of poverty and revitalize communities. So organizational standard 2.1 asks us to document or demonstrate partnerships across our community. And we know that they call this linkages. Partnerships can include other anti-poverty organizations in your area. You may have partnerships for specifically identified purposes, but you can use your strategic plan if it shows you that you are making a meaningful attempt to build linkages in your community. You can use your MOUs that are out there, upload those and say, guess what? I'm working with the Salvation Army in my community, and we're together working for our clients. We also can go to 2.2, which then asks us to utilize that data that we've gathered from key sectors of communities and to communicate our efforts. And we also are going to look at how we document the number of volunteers and hours mobilized in support of our activities. What does that mean? Again, your board members are volunteers. You should be recording all the hours that they work on community action agency business. That is volunteers. And again, because you're working with a tripartite board, you are then using those representatives of the low income community to show that we're going under maximum feasibility participation. The last one, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail at our next roundtable discussion, we're going to talk about community needs assessment, because we know that local control of federal CSBG resources is predicated on regular comprehensive community assessments that take into account the breadth of the community needs, as well as our partners and other resources that are available in our community to meet those needs. Regular assessment of these needs and resources at the community level is the foundation of what we do at community action. And it's a vital and important piece of our management and leadership that is used across the organization and utilized by the entire community to set the course for both CSBG and all agency resources. Why do we do assessments? We need to assess the gaps in services or identify resources that are available to address community needs. to develop program priorities, to support the need of funding, and assist with program evaluation. And we also do it to support organizational strategic planning. So organizational 3.1 says, guess what? You got to do a needs assessment every 3 years. More of us completed community needs assessments in fiscal year 2021 than ever before. And a lot of them got pushed into 2021 because of COVID. So there's a lot of new community assessments out there, and we'll be sharing those and talking about those in greater detail at our next training. We also ask on standard 3.2 that we make sure that we're able to document all 4 categories of gender, age, race, and ethnicity in our needs assessment. We need to show that we have collected and analyzed the data that we learned in our community needs assessment. And did we report and include these key findings on the causes and conditions of poverty and the needs in our community? And finally, did our board finally accept those findings? You need to show a motion and a vote that they did this. Again, those are minutes that you can just pop up onto your CAP 60 and show that those have been met. The second category for organizational standards addresses the vision and direction of community action. And our leadership is exemplified at all levels across the organization and starts with our mission that clarifies community action's work on poverty. A well-functioning board, a focused CEO or executive director, well-trained and dedicated staff and volunteers giving of themselves to help others will establish community action as the cornerstone and the leverage point to address poverty across the community. We need to make sure that we are providing strong leadership both for today and into the future, and that's critical. And organizational standards help us address the foundational elements of mission as well as the implementation of the model of good performance management, or ROMA. It ensures that CAAs have taken the steps to thoughtfully plan for today's work and for tomorrow's leadership. So when we look at this standard 4.1, the governing board has to ensure that it is addressed and reviewed the organizational's mission statement within the past 5 years, and assured that A, the mission addresses poverty, 2, the organizational programs and services are in alignment with the mission, and that we can show that with board minutes, strategic plans, and mission statements. 4.2 is going to ask us to make sure that our community action plan is outcome-based, anti-poverty focused, and ties directly into the community assessment. 3 is a standard that has a whole level of training all on its own, okay? So literally there are forms and tons of training sessions on meeting this standard. What 4.3 asks us to do is to look that, are we using ROMA continuously, or maybe not ROMA, but a comparable system that looks at assessment, planning, implementation, achievement as results, and evaluation. So in addition to this, the organization documents either having used the services of a ROMA certified trainer or the equivalent in assisting the implementation. So we're going to talk about standard 4.3. It deserves its very own whole training, and we'll be talking about that later in the year. Is your board receiving annual updates on the success of specific strategies included in your CAP or your community action plan? 4.5 wants us to look at having a written succession plan for the CEO or the ED of your program that's approved by the governing board for covering an emergency and unplanned short-term absence of 3 months or less, as well as outlining the process for filling a permanent vacancy if those should come up. 4.6 asks that we complete an organizational-wide comprehensive risk assessment every 2 years. So that is what we look like for organizational standard or leadership. And finally, for our third one, board governance. Board governance, community action boards are uniquely and purposely structured to ensure that maximum feasible participation by the entire community, including those that we call customers or clients. By law, community action boards are comprised of at least 1/3 low income consumers or their representatives, 1/3 low income, or excuse me, 1/3 elected officials or their appointees, and the remainder can be private sector community members. And so to make this structure work as intended, community action agencies have to recruit board members very thoughtfully. And this is super hard and comes with a whole lot of challenges all on its own. But we recruit these board members so we can work within the community to promote opportunities for low-income experienced users, whether that's board service. It helps us work with orientation, training, and supporting board members for their role in oversight. And boards are foundational to good organizational performance, and time invested to keep them healthy and active is significant, and we understand that, but it is very, very necessary. So an example, wait, what happened? Where's my good board governance? Okay, sorry. An example of this would be standard 5.2. The organization's governing board has written procedures that document a democratic selection process for low-income board members. And that I'm not, so it's, let me start over. So 5.2 says, this is how you're going to go ahead and do the democratic selection process. It doesn't tell you how to do it, just that you have to do it. And I'm not going to go through each one of the standards here because I do want you to refer back to that form that Aaron linked in the chat, because this form is going to go into much greater detail for your tripartite board. And because we all have different types of boards in Wyoming, public and private entities, some with subgrantees and some without, I'm going to address those in greater detail when I work with your specific boards. Again, in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and refer you back to the links that were put in the chat for you. So our next goal and our next category of looking through the organizational standards is that vision and direction. And establishing that vision for community action agency is a huge task. And setting the course to reach that through strategic planning is serious business. CSBG eligible entities, we take on this task by looking at both the internal functioning and at the community level. An efficient organization knows where it's headed, how the board and staff fit into that vision and the future, and how it's going to measure its success in achieving what it is set out to do. So this agency-wide process is always board-led, and it's constantly ongoing. A strategic plan is a living, breathing document that addresses measurable outcomes instead of just having a plan that's just written and sits on a shelf somewhere and stagnates. Often set with an ambitious vision, strategic plans set the tone for the staff and the board and are the key leadership and management tool for the organization. So organizational 6.1 says, hey, we have an organizational wide strategic plan in place that has been approved by our governing board within the past 5 years. The approved strategic plan addresses reduction of poverty. It addresses the revitalization of low-income communities and or the empowerment of people with low incomes to become more self-sufficient. The approved strategic plan contains family, agency, and community goals. Customer satisfaction data and customer input collected as part of that community assessment is included in the strategic planning process. Take a look at these documents that you could use to show what that looks like in customer service and showing it. Look familiar? Yeah, because you can use this documentation that we used in a previous organizational standard to use it here to meet organizational standard 6.4. The governing board then also has to receive an update on progress meeting the goal, or sorry, the board has to receive an update on progress meeting the goals of that strategic plan within the past 12 months. So while you only do a strategic plan every 5 years, or what is required to be 5 years, you have to review it at least once a year. And I'm going to offer that if you're not reviewing your strategic plan at least quarterly, then you are at risk of not following it or deviating for your strategic plan, which really is a guarantee that you're going to become lost in the weeds if you're not following what the plan was. And finally, operations and accountability. The human element of community action work is evident at all levels of the organization, and the relationship an organization has with its staff often reflects the organization's values and missions. Oversight of the chief executive officer or your executive director and maintaining strong human resource infrastructure are key responsibilities of board oversight. Attention to organizational elements such as policies, procedures, performance appraisals, and training are going to lead to strong organizations with the capacity to deliver high quality services in low-income communities. Organizational Standard 7.1 states that, Organizational Standard 7.1 is there for a public entity, but it's not applicable for local government because local government personnel policies are outside of the purview of the department and the tripartite board. Therefore, this standard does not apply to public entities. The fiscal bottom line of your agency is not isolated from its mission. It is a joint community consideration. Community action boards and staff maintain a high level of fiscal accountability through audits, monitoring by the state and federal agencies, and compliance with the Federal Office of Management budget circulars. The management of federal funds is taken seriously by all eligible entities, and the standards specifically reflect the board's oversight role as well as the day-to-day operational functions. An example of this is Organizational Standard 8.3, that the department's tripartite board or advisory board is notified of the availability of local government audits. The Community Action Network moves families forward out of poverty every day across this country. And we need to produce data that reflect the collective impact of those efforts. And individual stories are super compelling, but when we combine them with quantitative data, it's unstoppable. There is no data without stories and no stories without data. Community action needs to better document our outcomes, families, agencies, and communities will achieve. Community Service Block Grant funding confers the obligation and opportunity to tell the story of agency-wide impact and community change, and in turn, the impact of the network as a whole. In this one, Organizational Standard 9.2, the organization has a system or systems in place to track family, agency, and or community outcomes. Now, again, there are variants in these standards from public and private community action agencies. So once again, I'm going to refer you back to the links in the chat to look at your specific standards. And while these are very important standards, just like the other ones, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this training to address them. This is really agency specific that I would work with you individually as you see necessary. Okay. Any questions so far on what we've seen about the 3 categories of organizational standards, what is expected out of us, and what are documentation pieces that we can use to show that we have met those standards? Any questions? Okay, I'm seeing no questions. I am going to go on to CAP 60 uploads and what this looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. I'm going to go into my login, and I'm going to be going into Johnson County tripartite board on that one. Okay, let's see. Let me get that going. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see what this is going to look like. Okay, can you guys see my screen, the login for CAP 60? Yeah, no? You can? Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Oh, close, log in. All right, so what does it look like when you log into the back end of CAP 60 to do your needs assessments? Real easy. You're going to go up to your productivity tools. You can see I'm highlighting that right up here. As you go into your productivity tools, as you look along the left side of your screen, you can go down and click on organizational standards. And we're going to look at our organizational standards for these separate years. Before I go in and I do that, I want to make sure that I'm selecting the right one. So you'll see that there's an organizational standard for 20, for 21, for 22. I'm going to bring up my current 22 community standards. Now, one of the things that you're going to look at here is I placed my organizational standards to reflect back to 2019. And the reason I did that was so that if I had already uploaded documents last year that didn't expire until future years, for example, my strategic plan, we know that that is good for 5 years, that's going to show up again in my standards. If you did not use expiration dates on your uploads, then you're going to have a little bit of problem bringing those up. But I'll show you what I mean when I go there. So let's go see what meeting organizational standard 1.1, the organization demonstrates low income individual participation in its activities. Well, here's all the standard indicators that you may use to show that you have low-income individuals participating in your activities. Probably the most common one that we would use is our needs assessment. So I'm going to go up to my needs assessment and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload that. If I upload my needs assessment, I'm going to go in here and say when that expires. And I know that my needs assessment is brand new. So I'm going to say that it expires in 2004, and then I can go browse for that document. And then once I upload it, I'm going to save it and I'm going to go back. And now it's going to show me right here. Oh, I can look at it. I can go ahead here, click on this view uploaded documents. It's going to show me what I have there. And I can also make notes here. So if I were to go in here and put this notes in, is my CNA expires 2024. I can save that. And who did I leave a note for? I left a note for the state office. The state office is going to be able to go into my organizational standards and see where I have met those. Now, it's not always so easy to just do that. You can go in here, add your documents, but you also have to go over to your edit. Did you meet this standard? If you met this standard, you can say, yes, I met it. And I met it on October 18th of 2021. Okay, any questions about what it looks like to upload any of your standards? You can also go into your standards detail, which is what we just kind of looked at here. Now, one thing that I did, I had a little bit of problem going in and finding some of my old documents. And some of those old documents I know were in my 2021 community assessment. So I can go in there to that assessment and download an old one. So let's say I'm going into my old one here. I want to see all of my assessments. You can see that I've met some and I didn't miss some. So here is my mission statement. I'm going to look at 4.1. I can go in there and view my documents to make sure that I have the documents necessary. How often do we have to do the mission statement? Every 5 years. So if I have my minutes that say we approved the mission statement in 2021, I know that that's good for that long. All right, any questions? Okay.
Susan, this is Lily. Sorry, I just had a quick one.
Yeah,
I beg your pardon. Under the like 1.1, you can click on the, I think you clicked on edit and it brought up, yeah, all those different categories. Does that need an upload for every category?
You do not have to have an upload for every one of them.
Oh.
This is different indicators that you have those. Not everybody is going to do advisory groups.
Right.
Some might, some may not. So all of you though should have a governance meeting or board minutes that would indicate that you are able to meet this standard. It is the goal to be able to meet these standards multiple ways. We want to make sure that we're not just we don't want to just check boxes. We really want to use this information as a guide to really best practices. So there are going to be a lot of agencies. I've got all of those things. Great, upload them. That's wonderful. Unless I hear different from the state office, I have never been told that we have to upload more than one indicator of how we've met that goal. And I think if it asks for that, then it will tell you in the guidance and the description. But you need to at least show one way of how you've met that particular standard. Any other questions? Let me go into the chat real quick. All right, I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint really quick. Actually, let's see, which one are we going to go into? I think we're going to go into that one. All right, so can you guys see my screen again? Is it there? Thank you. Yes. So I'm going to go and just show you at the very end, we did our CAP 60 uploads. Each of your admin portals, you're going to be uploading that documentation. I shared my screen to show you what that's going to look like. And as we went through it, we looked at the first organizational standard in the list, and then I go back and I just start uploading. It's important to note again that when you upload those documents, that when you're meeting those organizational standards, that you are using the timeline that says this is when this document is going to expire. Those links in your the links that you have in your chat are really important to be able to help you empower your boards then to also meet the requirements. So as you look in there, you're going to see a board schedule. These are the things and the steps that you need to do in all of your board meetings to make sure that your board is able to provide you with the documentation necessary to meet your organizational standards. Very, very helpful tool. There is also a couple of links in there that are fillable PDFs that allow you to do a check mark. Oh, okay, we've got that, we've got that, we've got that. A little bit later, I'm going to go to Kyle to have him share with you ways that he makes uploading organizational standards a little bit easier too. So this link that we are looking at here is, again, all those important links in there that you want to go to. And then I also put in the dark blue here, the Community Action Partnership, is they have a deep library and a toolkit for every single category of organizational standards that you could possibly use. They have more detail than anything that I could show you today, and I really urge you to use that resource library. The other one that we wanted to talk about is, that's all well and great, Susan, but when do I have to upload these? Very good question, Susan. The timeline in which grantees are able to upload your supporting documentation to show compliance is October 1st of every year. And we have until January 31st to be able to upload all of those documents. Beginning in February, the state office, Erin's state office, is going to start monitoring the review. That means they're going into your CAP 60. They're going to start monitoring that review, and they have till about March 31st to complete that process. Then they're going to reach out to you and they're going to be like, hey, dude, Beth, I need you. You're missing this, 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 and this. And then they'll give you an opportunity to get those fixed and kind of work on this is not a gotcha moment. This is not an opportunity to say, ha, you're doing it wrong. Absolutely the opposite. They are required by OCS to make sure that their entities are meeting those organizational standards to ensure that we have the strongest Wyoming network possible. If for whatever reason an entity is not able to meet at least 70% of the organizational standards, the next recourse is a technical assistance plan or a TAP, or a QIP, which is a quality assurance improvement plan or something, I don't know. And that will, I mean, that's last resort type of stuff. Again, not intended to be a gotcha moment. We just have to be accountable for the federal funds that we're looking at. So these dates that you see on here, very contingent. And if you don't mind, Erin, if you want to say why those dates are contingent, and I'm going to urge you all to exercise patience as we go through this, because there's exciting reasons for why it might be a little bit different on these dates. Erin?
Thanks, Susan. So Susan is very excited. I'm pregnant. So I will probably be on maternity leave starting sometime in February. We don't really know when, right? You can't really plan a labor very well. So a lot of these dates will depend on when I'm on maternity leave, how long I'll be out, and honestly, whether I'll have a new independent contractor by then, and if we'll have an intern and what their role will look like. So things are kind of up in the air, but according to the feds, they're really trying to get things back on track this year. So just bear with us. We'll try and give everybody ample notice of everything as much as we can. But everybody's been great this year, and this year was really hectic, so I'm not super worried about it. Thanks.
It was crazy. Also, what another complicating factor, and it's not necessarily a complicating factor, but the feds are releasing the smart forms for our annual reporting, hopefully by December. So that's going to come in at the same time that a lot of you are going to be looking at uploading and finishing all the final steps for the organizational standards. So that's kind of one of the things that you want to bring into consideration also. But that being said, is don't wait till the last minute to be doing your organizational standards. As soon as you have those up and ready to go, it's going to be in your and Erin's best interest if you let her know right away. Hey, it's end of November. I've got them up and ready to go. Please check them out. Let her know that they're ready. So please don't wait to the last minute, and be flexible, be patient. There are really good reasons for why those dates might change a little bit. But does anybody have any question about those dates or what it looks like in the timeline that we're looking at? Kyle, you at the earlier of this session started telling me one of your tips that you do to make uploading every year for the organizational standards a little bit easier. Do you want to share that?
Their suggestions, I'm not sure I've accomplished all of them, but they seem like they would be good. So let me know if they work for you. But one of the things is I set up an agenda for 4 quarters. If you have more than a quarterly board meeting, at least once a quarter, you could have on your agenda to identify all the different standards that you have to go through. But even if you do it every month, set up your agenda or work with your board to set up your agenda so that you are identifying what standards that you need to make a motion on or to approve, like an annual report, the regular programmatic reports. Put it on the agenda what the organization number is that it would link to, so that when you get those minutes, and if your secretary or whoever is recording those minutes would identify that organization number in the motion, then once those minutes are received, you can make a copy of those minutes and you can create a folder structure online to where you have a folder for each one of those organizational numbers. And where you see that those minutes identify that organizational number, just make a copy of those minutes, pop it into that folder. Then when you're getting ready to say, oh, well, I need to identify 8.1 and upload documents, wherever you've accumulated those, you just go to that folder and you can, boom, upload every document that goes. So look at your agendas and put those organizational numbers as they are going to be addressed on your agenda. I make sure that they're going to be addressed every quarter, at least I try to, that's the intent. And so then I want to make sure that the board is also on a yearly basis addressing every one of the organizational items. Some of them are every 5 years. And so it's just the board looking and saying, is this one still active? Look at the date, we're still good. All right, move on. I've tried to assign them to 4 different committees so that the committees would be reviewing them rather than the entire board having to take time during a board meeting to evaluate. And then those committees would report on where they're at in meeting those organizational standards. I think some of the most important ones that we may have been missing out on is the community involvement. And so how is the board actually involving the community? What does that look like? And it's a year-long process. And so some of these, you might just be putting them in your folders because you've already got your approvals for the year, but now you've just got a new document that would work for the following year. So if you're putting that into your folders, as you're going along, as you're doing things, you can do that. One of the things I'm trying to do with my board, it's kind of hard. I don't know about your board members, but they are overwhelmed with their personal lives and everything else. I have a volunteer list. Sorry, a volunteer sign in. I use JotForm. They go on their phone, they go to a little app, they put the date, they put what they did for us volunteer-wise, whether it was a board meeting, committee meeting, and then they put how long they were with us and they give us their name and everything. And it goes into a spreadsheet. And then I have somebody who uploads those into Cap 60 for us in the volunteer section. And that way we're starting to accumulate our volunteer hours. And that way we're also seeing, well, how many hours are we getting for board? How many hours are we getting for committee? And who are all these people? And how can we contact them and involve them in other ways? And can we have them do surveys? Can we have them do? So some of that is just automation, also just trying to figure out, I mean, I've sometimes have struggled to get them to sign the conflict of interest document, and you're like going, come on, I'm like one person away. And I've put it online so that they can get to the document and then sign it online. And that could be using Adobe Sign. You could be using any number of things so that they can sign electronically. The program that I'm using is JotForm. I've got a paid version that I use. So I use JotForm for a lot of my online forms that I use outside of Cap 60. We also have the Cap 60 kiosk. So we went from using an online app through JotForm to using the kiosk, but I also use JotForm for the kiosk when I needed to.
And if you don't have a JotForm or the ability, you can do Google Forms, which is a free resource that also allows you to ask any questions, and it goes into a spreadsheet that allows you to track as necessary that way as well.
But I think the main thing is break it out into a calendar. When you look at 58 standards or 53, it's overwhelming. But if you could look at by a month or by a quarter, hey, we're just going to look at this, and especially the ones that are on a every 3 year or every 5 year, it's just making sure that you're still within date, boom, check it off, we're good. And a lot of these, once you've actually got your structure into place, it's just repeating because you're already doing it and you're just making sure that you're documenting it. And a lot of times it's just remembering in your board meetings to have it mentioned in a motion, and then you've got your documentation. But it also does help you to set up, like if you're doing surveys, if you're getting input from the public, remembering, and it's hard to sometimes remember, but it's just getting in that habit of like, okay, I need to document that we did this, and what documentation am I going to use?
And one of the things that I want to go back to is it's really easy to look at this as just checking the boxes, right? It's like, oh, just do it, check it out. But I really want you, we kind of talked about the reasons for why these organizational standards are important. And I know that when you're in grant writing season and COVID has hit and you can't have enough employees and your board's not involved, I get how challenging and difficult these can be. And it feels sometimes like it's something that's being done to you and not with you. And I understand that and I appreciate that. But when you take the time to really look at the very basics of why we're doing this, it makes for a stronger community action agency. It makes sure that we're accountable for the things that we're supposed to be doing. The state of Wyoming receives $3.2 million every year to address the causes and conditions of poverty. Are we doing what the taxpayers are asking us to do? And we do that in the best possible way. So while, yes, you have to meet these standards, yes, we have to check those boxes, but doing it with the right intent and the reasoning behind it is really important. Yes, Kyle.
I think one thing that we've also discovered this year in the midst, well, in previous year, in the midst of a crisis, is that we need to do a better job of communicating that we have these standards and that we are meeting these standards, because they make us an agency or an organization within a community that is meant to be the hub, that is meant to be able to cooperate and work with all the various partners to achieve and addressing the crisis moments that we are encountering. And a lot of our communities have only perceived this as just another one of those groups. And one of the things that we are working on this year, and we will be communicating, is the value of community action and how we can be a clearinghouse or a storehouse for the communities that we serve, and how we can partner with so many different agencies. And it's in part because at the essence of our mission and our purpose are these standards, to where it's not just about us, but it's how can we support the other agencies in our communities that are helping people and doing great things, and how can we do it together. But we might also be a recipient or able to receive grants or funding that they can't, but then we can receive them and work with them and partner with them to support their mission and their goals, so long as we're working on addressing poverty. And a lot of organizations, you get banks and other big funders who look at it and they're like, how do we know we can trust your structure? This gives us that credibility.
Absolutely. And who is one of our biggest partners in our community? Head Start. And we're going to be learning about Head Start in our communities, what it looks like in the state of Wyoming in December. So make sure you take a look at that event training coming up, because they are our sisters in community action. They are our neighbors, our cousins, whatever you want, whatever reference you want to have on there. We're doing the same thing for the same purposes, for many of the same people. And we can't be all things to all people all of the time. We have to look for our partnerships to be able to access and do really, really good work. All right, we're out of time today, you guys. I want to thank you very much for joining us on this here in Sheridan, rainy day. I don't know how it is for the rest of the state. Please feel free to reach out to me or Erin with any training or technical assistance questions that you may have for organizational standards. I am here for you. I am here to meet with your board, to do board trainings, to do these things that help engage your board to make a stronger organization. Erin is always here for you to answer any of your compliance questions. And again, she will let us know when that deadline is for uploading. Please don't upload after that date unless you let Aaron know. We just need to have a clear stopping point so they know what is the current, what is old. So with that all being said, thank you all very, very much. And I will see you next time. Bye.